I'm very honored to be kicking off this session in your conference on sustainability. Due to some technical difficulties on my side, I think we're going to be asking for someone on your side to please be sharing my slides. So if we can take a moment and ask that those be brought up. All right, so it looks like we are ready to start. Again, it's very good to be with you, and I very much appreciate on behalf of IFAC this opportunity to talk with you. I want to thank you because we think that sustainability, from IFAC's perspective, we think that sustainability and the role of the profession is one of the key enablers in the sustainable transition that you've already been talking about today. And I hope that this will come to life in the remarks that I have prepared for you. Next slide, please. So my agenda covers topics that I hope demonstrate the various ways that our profession, each of us individually, as professional accountants working inside of companies, as employees of PAOs, or as professional accountants in public practice, all of us can and must play an important role in the sustainable transition. Next slide, please. Earlier this year, IFAC published a call to action that suggests important next steps for all of us in the accountancy profession. I'm sorry, if we could go back one slide, please. Now that the International Sustainability Standards Board, the ISSB, is a reality, with a mission to establish a comprehensive global baseline of disclosure requirements that address enterprise value of companies, our CEO, Kevin Dancy, wanted to focus our profession on transforming high-quality standard setting for sustainability into high-quality information, and to bring trust and confidence to what is reported through high-quality assurance. So there are two main points. The first is that the world needs high-quality sustainability information. So we need to do the following. We must support the idea of an investor-focused global baseline of sustainability disclosures. This is the mandate of the new ISSB. Where we can, we must contribute to the ISSB's technical standard setting processes. We must advocate at home with local policymakers and regulators for ISSB adoption and alignment. And we must make the case for mandatory sustainability assurance. Our second big task is to champion our profession. The fact that we are at the center of information flows and decision-making and can use our fundamental skills and competencies to connect financial and non-financial information. And finally, more personally, as professional accountants in our day-to-day work, we can take proactive steps to enable sustainable change by being proactive in reporting the effects of climate change in financial statements under existing financial reporting standards and best practices, by working to integrate ESG subject matter and a greater comfort with the forward-looking nature of sustainability information into our foundational skills, and by breaking down ESG versus financial information silos within companies. We call this adopting an integrated mindset. This is what we believe the accountants profession must and can do. Next slide, please. So I'd like to say more about this idea of adopting or championing an integrated mindset. This is important thought leadership work that's led by IFAC's Stathis Gould. As sustainability-related information takes its rightful place alongside traditional financial reporting, it has become more apparent than ever that sustainable value creation is the right approach for business and for society. Integrating sustainability or ESG risks and opportunities into the way companies think in the boardroom, among senior management, in the way strategies and business models and decisions are made, this is a clear path to corporate success. So in other words, we believe that sustainability starts inside of companies, and this is the starting point for our discussion today on the role of the profession in sustainability. So I would encourage all of you to Google IFAC's website and review this one-page publication in more detail, but let me highlight a few key points. First, information silos within companies between chief financial officers and corporate sustainability officers, for example, are barriers to value creation. We all need high-quality information for investors as well as for good decision-making inside of companies. And CFOs, along with finance and accounting professionals, are critical to bridging this gap. Breaking down information silos is also key to enhancing the way that companies communicate with investors and other stakeholders. The goal is to improve what companies report so that financial capital is allocated to sustainable value creation. And finally, we must have trust and confidence in sustainability information. If ESG factors are going to influence capital allocation decisions, which is clearly the case, they must be on par with financial information. Again, this is the expertise of finance and accounting professionals working under the CFO. So as we turn our attention, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, to the adoption and implementation of ISSB disclosure requirements, this integrated mindset approach can drive company reporting that's not a compliance exercise, but it's reporting that transforms and helps deliver more sustainable businesses. Next slide, please. So if adopting an integrated mindset is where it all starts, it still depends on having high quality, relevant, consistent, comparable, and assurable information. So high quality disclosures on sustainability information is another critical role of our profession in sustainability. As I've already mentioned, IFAC has been a strong advocate for an investor-focused global baseline of sustainability reporting requirements that can be used around the world, much as IFRS standards for financial reporting are used by some 140 jurisdictions. Today, the new International Sustainability Standards Board is a reality. Its final board member, a second vice chair from China, was just recently announced. The board has published its first two exposure drafts, one addressing climate and another for general sustainability disclosures. The board is reviewing some 1,300 comment letters with a view that it will finalize these two standards in early 2023. The IFRS Foundation has announced an important collaboration agreement with GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative. It's intended to better allow multi-stakeholder focused or societal impact reporting to be coordinated with the investor-focused standard setting of the ISSB. The ISSB has also taken steps to formalize collaboration between its global initiative and jurisdiction or regional specific initiatives. With all of these steps, the pathway to a global baseline of sustainability disclosure is becoming clearer. Recently, the G7 weighed in, saying that countries need to prepare for using the baseline reporting requirements. We must try to avoid regulatory fragmentation. And the ISSB needs to go beyond climate and set standards for a broader range of ESG topics. Finally, with IOSCO's expected endorsement of the ISSB's first two standards, which is likely in early 2023, the stage is set for individual countries to determine how to adopt, apply, or be informed by the ISSB standards. Next slide, please. So this is all great progress, but there is more going on in the ESG arena than just the ISSB, which is to acknowledge two extremely important jurisdictional initiatives in the European Union and the United States, among others around the world. IFAC has welcomed all of these well-intentioned initiatives, and we have encouraged alignment. This past June, we issued a joint statement along with PRI, which is a globally recognized advocate for responsible investment, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is a global parent network comprised of about 200 companies. Together, our three organizations called for alignment on concepts, terminology, and metrics among these three initiatives, and to avoid standard setting or regulatory fragmentation. There are now 65 co-signers to this statement, investors, preparers, including the 6 largest accounting firm networks. So now is the time to harmonize and rationalize ESG reporting. It's not the time to ensconce fragmentation. With respect to the United States, I think there's general consensus that the climate-specific provisions of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and those of the ISSB share many key areas of alignment. The SEC has a real opportunity here to support a global system for reporting, at least with respect to climate topics. We may see some next steps from the Commission in December after the US congressional elections. On the other side of the Atlantic, the European Union's standard setting initiative has delivered a much more extensive set of draft requirements. There is concern over the volume and complexity of these draft requirements, and that comes in particular from payers and from our profession. And the double materiality approach in the EU is challenging to align with the work of the ISSB. So again, how much alignment happens is still not 100% clear. But the political will is strong to move ahead in Europe with mandatory reporting according to a uniquely European approach. Next slide, please. So considering jurisdiction-specific initiatives, how do we simplify all this complexity in the context of the ISSB's global ambitions? From our analysis, a rational system for reporting on ESG consists of two components. First, a global baseline of disclosures that will be set by the new ISSB for investors. Second, multi-stakeholder or societally focused reporting requirements that are best set at the jurisdiction-specific level. So the technical term for this is the building block approach. But in IFAC's response to both the ISSB and IFRAG, we explained it this way. Perspective one is outside-in disclosures that address how ESG factors and a company's actions related to ESG can impact the enterprise value or performance of a company. And this is the primary focus of the ISSB. The second perspective, inside-out disclosures, address multi-stakeholder needs, societal impacts, those not already captured by the assessment of enterprise value. So this has been the focus over the past 20 years of GRI standards. And this is why GRI and the IFRS Foundation have signed the collaboration agreement that I mentioned earlier. This agreement demonstrates how these two different perspectives on sustainability can in fact be complementary, not competing, and together they can deliver a full materiality solution. If the ISSB provides the global baseline of investor-focused disclosures, then local authorities can determine what else they may require local companies to report as a complement to that global baseline. So I encourage you to Google IFAC building block approach and to review the short 2-page document that's pictured on the right. One last point here. IFAC has also issued helpful guidance on the issues and processes that PAOs can address now with their local authorities for making global ISSB standards into local reporting requirements. We believe now is the time for us as a profession to engage with policymakers to highlight the mechanisms already in place for using IASB financial reporting standards and determine if the same or different mechanisms for adoption and endorsement are needed to implement ISSB disclosure for ESG. And that's the second document pictured on the left. Next slide, please. So having examined the standard setting and reporting role of the profession, we now turn our attention to our role in bringing trust and confidence to sustainability information through high-quality assurance engagements. Assurance of ESG looms large as both a challenge and an opportunity for our profession. This summer, IFAC published an update to last year's benchmarking study, which we called the State of Play in Sustainability Assurance, which we did in partnership with AICPA-CIMA. Our work this year looks at 2020 reporting, so we now have a 2-year trend line, and we expect this project to be supplemented with 2021 data later this year. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of interesting data and insights from our research. I'm just going to give you a few of the highlights. For 2020, we again examined information from 1,400 companies in the G20 countries, plus Singapore and Hong Kong SAR. We find a lot of ESG reporting. Still about 90% of companies are reporting some ESG information. Assurance lags reporting, but there was an increase from 51% to 58% in 2020 in the companies who obtained assurance over at least some of the information, the ESG information that they reported. Most assurance, still about 8%, is limited, not reasonable in nature. When audit firms are doing, and audit firms are doing the majority of these engagements, just over 60%. But that means that close to 40% of engagements are being done outside of the profession. When accounting firms are engaged, they're overwhelmingly using IAASB assurance standards. And one more statistic, which really points to the importance of the ISSB initiative. 80% of companies who report ESG information use multiple standards or frameworks. We believe this is a barrier to consistent, comparable, and reliable information, does not support the quality of ESG information that investors and other stakeholders want, nor does it provide the best foundation for our profession to provide high-quality assurance. Next slide, please. So now, focusing on assurance. I've already noted the increase from 51% to 58%. The biggest increases in insurance were in Australia, Brazil, Italy, and the UK. Of 833 assurance reports that we observed, 61% resulted from engagements conducted by audit firms, but there were big differences between jurisdictions. For example, in France, audit firms have close to 100% market share. In South Korea, where there is a very high level of assurance, the market is dominated by other types of service providers. So while consultants are doing ESG engagements virtually in every jurisdiction we studied, there are 6 cases in particular where most of the assurance is provided by consultants. That's happening in the US, the UK, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and South Korea. Where the IAASB standard ISAE 3000 revised is the dominant standard used for assurance, 72% of the time, we see a slight increase in the number of engagements conducted by consultants, and that has resulted in more references to non-IAASB standards. So this manifests itself in a divergence in the level of assurance provided. When firms do assurance using ISAE 3000, 97% of those engagements result in limited opinions. When consultants are engaged, 59% of engagements result in limited opinions, but 23% are moderate and 18% are reasonable. All this said, it's important to note that the IAASB has answered the call to further develop assurance standards to be even more useful to practitioners of sustainability assurance engagements. A new standard we call ISSA 5000, and the IAASB is moving with pace towards publishing a draft, hopefully in late 2023. Next slide, please. Last year, once we published our report, we conducted extensive engagement to understand differences between jurisdictional practice. And in December, we published IFAC's vision for high-quality assurance sustainability information. It was based on emerging best practices we observed in the market, and it was predicated on high-quality global standards. I'd urge everyone later on to take a look, to Google IFAC vision and take a closer look at this. So on the final slide, I'd like to conclude my remarks by circling back to this idea that we must acknowledge our role as the enablers of the sustainability movement. The harmonized global system that we've discussed today reduces complexity, confusion, and cost for everyone. And such a harmonized global system for reporting helps accelerate sustainability, and that's really what it's all about. This is a journey for our profession, and it's going to take time. And it will proceed at different speeds in different jurisdictions or regions. But at IFAC, we believe, and we encourage you to believe, that there is no more exciting or bigger opportunity for professional accountants than to join this important initiative and to be part of the sustainable transition. With that, thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the panel discussion.